sending people home in the dark. They're on the road.
That's right.
So
That's right.
If we fall back, it'll be darker and more deer get hit.
Yep.
So
Yep.
if we get to that, we can bring it up.
All right. Welcome to the Elk Season Podcast, episode 30.
30.
Did we talk about what day it was? It's November
3rd.
Okay, thank you. It's November 3rd, episode 30 of the Elk Season Podcast. Elk Season is dedicated to archery elk, the greatest outdoor sport in North America.
Bestest, awesomest.
Yep. There's nothing better. I talked to a guy outside the school waiting to pick up our kids today. He's talking about hunting. A lot of guys call it deer season.
Yeah.
Because they just don't live out west. Or elk are so impossible?
Unattainable.
Yeah, sorry, that's a much better word.
It's also a horrible movie. Look, the movie was fine in terms of you know what I'm talking about.
Which movie?
The Unobtainable movie.
Oh, Unobtainium?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. That was
anyway, back on task.
elk season. We were talking about elk season.
Unobtainable elk. You're saying,
and so he said, if I miss opening weekend, I don't go hunting.
huh?
Because after the first shot of opening morning, everything hides. Nobody ever kills anything after opening morning.
Yeah,
Or the difficulty level is increased
sure.
perceptively. I don't think so. I think if you're road hunting with a rifle,
Yeah,
it's going to be tough. But if
Absolutely.
you can get out of the truck, you'll be okay.
A couple steps at least. You get your steps
Just
in.
a few.
Just go a few feet off the road. You'll be fine.
So today's episode of the Elk Season Podcast, we want to finish talking about Elk Season 2022.
Yeah.
If you missed it, I had so much video. I honestly just posted it yesterday.
Wow. Okay.
Last week's podcast, I finally got it up on YouTube because I had so many videos to go over. I have so much media.
There was a lot. I mean, and then to have, is it 3 episodes though? Because we had, or is this the third episode?
This is
For
the
some
third
reason I thought this would
episode.
be the fourth, but that's
Yeah,
okay.
I went over my first 2 weekends on the first podcast. I went over the third weekend last week, and here we're ready to talk about the fourth weekend, and to wrap it up.
Yeah.
To say, well, that's elk season.
And in the
2022.
part, I have an opportunity to kind of recount my perspective, right? Because it's really been,
yeah,
I've had some of my,
you were with us on Labor Day weekend.
Yeah.
And you gave everything you had from your perspective then. And now we have like real elk hunting encounter to talk about. A real elk. Also, last week when I posted that on YouTube, if you want to watch my elk fall over,
yeah,
it's on
Oh,
YouTube
man.
now.
Whew.
It's on YouTube.
It's the classic shot and drop. I mean, it's,
I even slowed it down.
Wow.
I showed it, I think 3 times, maybe only twice, but the first time in real time, the second time at half the speed, just to say, oh yeah, there it is.
It's an amazing ethical kill with an arrow. I mean,
Yeah.
it was the perfect shot.
Yeah.
I know you keep saying it was a little bit high, but the thing was already suffering, as we've established.
Yeah.
And you helped it effectively be done
Yeah.
suffering.
Yeah.
So that to me,
And quickly.
yeah.
And I've always been shocked at what a good shot from a bow can do.
Yeah.
Ooh,
It's
is
lethal.
lethal. It is so
Lethal.
bad. And I watched a lot of video because a lot of editing that for YouTube is I have to watch the video again and decide what to put in it.
Yeah.
So then I have to cut that out and put it in. But part of what I didn't put in, I should just make its own YouTube adventure from all the phone video that I have. But walking up on that elk and seeing the arrow and go, yeah, there's my arrow.
Yeah. But
That was not my arrow. Have you ever seen that shot? I haven't even showed you that.
Maybe not, but
Maybe I have, maybe I haven't. But it did not represent at all the direction my arrow was going.
yeah.
And I go, yeah, that's my arrow. But at first I'm like, is that
Right.
my arrow? So anyways, I have that on video. And then I say, oh yeah, here's the arrow. It's definitely not mine.
Yeah.
But the kill shot is there. The little adventure I made with here's my blade of grass, and I'm pointing. Here's where
Yeah.
the elk is. Here's what my plan is, and so part of that is on YouTube. But I got home. We got the elk process. I brought you some steak tonight.
Yeah, I'm excited to try that out when I get around to it.
Yeah. And today we're here to talk about the very last weekend of elk season that we had,
Right.
which was effectively the last weekend because it ended on a Thursday.
Right.
It was a Friday. It was
a Friday.
Yeah.
The actual elk season ended on a Thursday because the 30th fell in the middle of the week. But we had our last opportunity that weekend.
Right.
But and my job just this year trying to give as much time for Labor Day weekend, which in hindsight, it was worth it. But at the same time, I don't want to dedicate that much time to the hot part of the month anymore.
It is excruciating to make that decision because you think about elk season for 11 months.
Yeah.
And you're like, I don't want to wait 3 more weeks.
And as we got close, in every fall, and this fall was a little bit more packed for me, I had to be very careful with what time I spent away, which sucked really bad. So it's not that it was bad, though, because this semester, this fall, I kind of needed to have it heavy at the beginning because I just have been so busy.
Yeah.
And so when I get to the last hunt that I can actually do, in my mind, and you know how my mind works, I tend to get to a point where I know what I can and can't do, and though it might feel premature, I have to put the brakes on. So I'll come back to the brakes because that played a role in the weekend.
Sure.
But I have to get up there, and I have effectively a Saturday and a Sunday because I'm going to be leaving a Friday afternoon. I might have a little bit of a hunt that Friday night. But Saturday is the day for me if I'm going to get anything. I have to get it down Saturday morning in my mind.
Yeah.
I'm going to stay out all day Saturday because if I have to,
Saturday night would be okay.
Saturday night would be okay, but the next day, I just couldn't justify the time that I knew it was going to take, knowing what you had gone through. Even though it was a much shorter distance, we didn't have that far to go.
Yeah.
It's still a lot of work, and you're still recovering from your adventure
Absolutely.
of hauling that elk out. And so
Absolutely.
I just felt like it didn't make sense to go up and put myself through that much time, or that to have that much stress, rather.
Right.
As successful as I felt like we could be.
It's life balance.
Because the thing that got me the most was the experience that we had, and we'll start with Friday, but Saturday, and you'll hear what I'm talking about. Saturday was such a eye-opening moment that
it was
to replicate. And there's something that we did that I was like, we could replicate this on Sunday. Yeah,
no question.
But so basically, I had a day and a half. Is really all I got. So we get up there Friday, and initially you're like, I'm going to get up there before you.
Yeah.
I don't know if you said Jared was going to come down or something at one point. But
I wanted to get up there. I wanted to check the camera.
Yeah,
I wanted to get a census. I know that your time is limited, so I wanted to spend time up there saying, here's where the elk are going to be. Let's go.
But so you weren't able to do that. But I was actually kind of looking forward to like the scouting report and all that stuff. But at the same time,
I look forward to the drive up there with you too.
Yeah, there is that. And even though you couldn't do that, the drive up there is always a fun thing because we can talk rather than, it's just in separate vehicles. So we get up there and we get out of the vehicle. I'm kind of jealous because like you don't have to carry around a bow.
Yeah.
But you still carry around a lot of stuff.
I got tons of stuff. Because I didn't have my bow, I did bring my spotting scope.
Yeah.
Which came in handy.
Yeah.
You'll see it on YouTube.
Yeah, that's right.
More
That's
work
right.
for me.
That's right. And so
it's worth it.
We get up there with enough time to have a night hunt. We know the area pretty well. We also know the area is sort of favored by a lot of hunters.
And if I may, real quick, tell you that I hiked out on Sunday night, and I didn't even go to the gym all week because my feet were in such bad shape.
Wow.
So I really am healing up from my own hike.
Yep.
So I just wanted to. That was really all I had to say about Friday. Was I'm still hurting.
Yeah.
I'm not physically sore. I'm healed there, but the skin on my body was so worn down.
Yeah.
My heels. I had blisters on my feet that just hadn't repaired yet. Some of them still aren't.
And I had bought a new pair of boots.
Yeah.
That kept me solid through Labor Day weekend. Like I didn't have any more purple toes. I had a toenail digging into another toe because I forgot to trim a toenail. That was the worst. And that's not a big deal to me. When I hike, I'm so hard on my feet that I'm still recovering from purple toes from when we went up and placed cameras in June.
Yeah.
But I don't have anything that I'm recovering from any hunting we did in September.
Right.
So I'm really happy with the new boots I have. But we're up there and we're going to go and do an evening hunt and kind of get an idea of where are the animals. And so as we're hiking in, we run into other hunters that are also hiking in.
Yeah.
And so I guess one of the tales or one of the lessons from this last hunt is something we've talked about before on this podcast, and is what are the other hunters doing? Right. And so there are a couple of guys kind of like us, a little bit older, big guys, and
2 older big guys
from the area. They know the place, and they had been up there all month, they said.
Yeah.
And so I almost said where they're from. Whoops. Actually, no whoops, because I didn't say it.
But I don't even know where they're from.
The town nearby over. Because they knew people that you knew.
Oh, that's right. That's right. Okay.
So there was a weird small connection there, and they were really cool. So we started talking about them, and I have not meant to be rude in the past to other hunters that are like wondering where you're going to go. But at the same time, we all have to hunt. And so if you're headed out, that's one thing. But if we were both heading in, we need to come up with a game plan. So I'm more likely to talk more about plans at that point. So these hunters were like, well, where are you going? And like, well, our game plan was to get up here and try to get to some cameras, which are up this particular ridge, which is just right up here. And they're like, oh, they kind of have this crap. And they were headed that direction because they had seen some elk up there. So you and I quickly made a game plan, and I actually didn't even ask you permission.
Didn't need to. You were right on. We were on the same page.
We just knew. And so we have a place called the Candy Cane. I look, how about the Candy Cane? And we're like, yep. And I go, we'll go on the other side of this valley, guys. You have that side. And they looked really relieved at that. Like, I was really happy that we could accommodate that. Just knowing the area. And it still was fruitful.
Yeah.
For us. So we got up to this place we call the Candy Cane, and we're watching. We saw a cow.
Yeah.
In a place that we call the Cross. Not to get you lost on what this is, but we go to the Candy Cane, we see the Cross, we know how to navigate to it. And by the time we got over there, it was
so the sun was the shade was crawling up the mountain.
Yeah.
At the point where we were in the shade and the Cross was still in the light, then we could see.
It was actually this weird optical illusion that only happens at the right time of day.
For minutes.
I would not have seen this cow if I had not looked at it at that moment in time, because we lost it after that. And then when we hiked over there, we just never saw anything else.
There's always elk up there.
But
that's
that's kind of why we went there. We're like, if we go up to this place, although it's not the best scouting location for vision, because we would be seeing where those guys were at more than we would be seeing on our side of the hill. So you have to be very intentional with where you're looking on our side. So I think it was a stroke of luck that I saw that, but it gave us something to do. And we get over to the Cross. We don't see anything, but I took a moment. I took a few pictures because it's so beautiful.
Every time.
Every time.
And if you ever posted one, you would know exactly where we're hunting from. So we never get to share these beautiful pictures.
It's just like, my goodness.
Breathtaking.
And
every time.
So couldn't get no calling sequence was really going to work for us that night. We didn't see any elk anywhere else that night either. But we had a plan for the next morning.
Right.
And it was a little bit nerve-wracking for me, because if I know these other hunters are up there, but the behavior of the other hunters, this is what I was sort of banking on.
Yeah.
Those guys were coming back to the area after they had gone down and taken a nap during the day.
Right.
That's a behavior of hunters I've seen in this area every year. You'll see them in the morning, in the evenings, but you never see them in the middle of the day. So they come and go.
Right.
And there's nothing wrong with that behavior. People will be successful that way.
Yeah.
That's just not my choice. But there's also another behavior that I was banking on, because when you see that, you also have a tendency to see hunters that get out of bed late.
Yeah. We've done it. I would say more often than not.
More often than not. And that's why this was a meaningful hunt.
Yeah.
Because these hunters told us none of the animals are talking, and it's hard to find them.
Yeah.
And I go, well, that's a curious notion. But we made a conscious decision. Now, before we get to the conscious decision, we hiked out of the Candy Cane in a way we never did. And I don't know why I feel like I need to say this, but we hiked out in the dark, and we hiked out a place we hadn't hiked out before. And it was like a magical pathway. We had one spot that was a bit of a nuisance, but it was like, how did we never? We keep this. The more you
we've
hunt
hiked out right of that spot and left of that spot and been miserable because of it.
Yes,
but we went straight down the middle.
I am never going to forget that hike out, because we spend a lot of time at the Candy Cane.
There's another factor that you haven't mentioned.
The Cross. I mean,
is the elevation people are dedicated to hike to, right?
Yep. Oh, and how they're hiking to it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So these other hunters, I mean, again, it's not the strategy I prefer, and it's not that it's not a useful strategy, and they clearly use it because it's been beneficial for them
Right.
to some way. But hiking up the gullies and hiking up the ravines versus hiking up the ridge lines,
Right.
is just something where I think I've always just drawn the line. I'd rather hike up the ridge line because I get vantage and I get elevation quicker, but I have to work a little bit harder.
Right.
And so, was that where you were going?
Well, yeah. So what, some of the things I count on, and why I preach fitness for elk season, is you want what others have. You have to be willing to do what others won't do,
Right.
And you have to be able to hike. And when we saw John, the elk tooth necklace guy,
Yes.
he hikes high,
Yes, he does.
way high. And he did take a nap with us. He kind of,
Yes,
in the afternoon.
I'm not opposed to taking a nap on the hillside. I used to be more opposed to that, but
If you're up early enough, nothing wrong with a nap.
yep.
I learned that.
Yeah, that was
you really kind of need it at that point.
that was in play
but
as well.
worth it.
Yes.
But worth it. I'm not going to sleep now, but I will sleep up on the
I
mountain.
will also say, just quickly, an amazing transformation of this area due to a watershed moment. Like the clouds opened up and dug ravines where you would just barely,
Pictures and video on YouTube.
yeah,
Yeah.
you would just barely step over a creek, but now you have a ravine. Like we had to find a place to cross. Because it was so deep. Like somebody
We had to climb down and climb back out of the wash that a single storm caused.
Yeah, and you would have thought that somebody was up there with a trencher. I mean, I kept trying to make stupid jokes about the they're going to install the cable internet up here. It's just like, my goodness.
It was absolutely devastating. And we've been hiking up there for many years and never seen that. We've seen flood damage, but from snow melt.
Yeah.
I was up there in July.
Yep.
And
it was fine.
And I did that had not happened yet. So it was a single thunderstorm that just hit our mountain.
Yeah.
And carved grooves all the way down.
And it's funny to say that because we hiked up the opposite side of this valley the night before. Nothing like that.
Yeah.
But when we hiked up the next day,
that's right.
It was all washed out on the other side.
Yeah.
So anyway, we made the decision once we got back to camp, we need to be up and early.
Yeah.
Hunters are notoriously determined, but also curiously lazy.
Yeah.
And so we're trying to fight that within ourselves, as we mentioned.
Always motivation is a big deal.
So
I'm away from the house. I don't have a boss, right?
Yeah.
I already got an elk down. I'm not expected to return home with anything.
Yeah.
But that's really easy to
we set
stay
the
in bed.
alarm at 4:00.
Yeah.
We were on the trail by 4:30.
Yeah.
And so by the time, we
4:30 and 5.
Between 4:30 and 5.
We woke up at 4:30. We were on the trail at like 5:03.
I was a half hour late.
Because I thought it's going to take us 2 hours, and we want to be 2 hours in
to a place that we call the plateau.
Light. Yeah.
So by the time we were about 40 minutes away from the plateau.
Yeah.
And that's when we saw our first truck headlights heading to the trailhead.
Yep.
So the sun is starting to show itself over the mountain, but it's still really dark.
We've turned our headlamps off already.
We're at the point where we can hike in the dark without too much hindrance.
Yeah.
And so the headlights are starting to show up, but they're an hour behind us.
Yeah.
And
we're hard hour.
Yeah.
It's an hour to the tree.
Yeah.
So we might have been 90 minutes in.
Yeah.
But by the time we saw the first set of headlights,
I think we were. I think we were just below the plateau because we'd hiked up to the second, the little rock outcropping right below our plateau.
Yeah.
And so
we can see our camp from there.
Yeah.
It's a long ways up. It's a hike and a half.
And that's what I like about this area is that it goes in the face of a lot of things that I had that some people had tried to peddle me about elk behavior and trails and roads. I can see my camp from a lot of places up here, and I have the best encounters with elk in this spot. So I get why a lot of people like it, but I've also learned that the elk are going to be responding to the hunter's behaviors, and the hunter's behaviors, if you can figure them out, you can predict that the elk will be moving around beyond the hunting the hunter's activity.
Right.
So that means if the hunters are notoriously dedicated but notoriously lazy, you gain the advantage if you get out earlier. And that's what we're always told. That's what I've experienced when I've done it, but I get lazy. And this time kind of reminded me, opened my eyes back up to the reality. We're up on the hillside. We know we're alone. If we hear anything, we know it's an elk.
Yeah.
We have vantage over the other hunters who are not on the hillside yet because they're still in their cars driving up to the trailhead.
Yeah. And we've been hiking for 90 minutes, and
Yes.
all the action is over 90 minutes after that.
Yes.
So they missed everything.
Yeah.
Of course they missed everything. They're 90 minutes behind us.
By the time they catch up to us,
It's over. It's
They're-
over. And the elk are so
and-
high by then.
and what we're going to hear if you run into a hunter, they're not talking and we can't find them.
Yeah.
So that's so the correlation between what we heard the previous day versus what's going on. But our experience being in front of the crowd,
Yep.
the elk are talking.
And sometimes we see 10, 14 cars at the trailhead.
Yeah.
So we don't know what's going to be there. It was light this year.
Yeah.
It was
It was
pretty
about
light this
4 or
year.
5. Yeah.
Yeah.
But we're up there and we get to where we're almost to the plateau when we hear our first sound, and it's a bugle.
Yeah.
And
Solid.
it's just above us. So we are about 10, 15 minutes from shooting.
Yeah.
So we have an opportunity to get set up and start doing a calling sequence. And, there's so many things that you wish you could change about,
Yeah.
but we know better because we hadn't hunted up there until this time. And
Yeah, it's
anyway.
all right. It's
So-
everything you do is practice for what you're doing next.
So we had actually camped in a grove of trees that is now burned out because there's a big burn area up here. And so I go up to the place where we had camped, and you hang
Yeah.
out about, what did you say, about 100 yards behind me?
Yeah. Yeah.
And
it was about 100. Maybe a little more, maybe a little less.
So
but
I'm not supposed to make any noise, but I keep an elk
call
call
ready.
handy.
Yeah.
And so as you're calling, I'm standing next to this tree. I have a full view of this plateau, this flat area. It's beyond a couple of dead trees that I'm standing next to. It's open space. It's flat. If this thing comes down in the middle between me and 60 yards, it's done.
It's done.
It's about 110 yards across. And I've always wanted to be able to have good encounter with elk. I've seen elk up here
Yeah.
from other mountains, and
Yeah.
I want, right. So
The first time, you see this field, and there are thousands of places where you're like, I can picture
Yep.
a bugling elk strutting across this
Yep,
field,
yep.
and this plateau is one of them. Is
Yeah.
it's at the top of a short list
Yeah.
of places we would love to see elk.
yeah. And so we've seen them there, but we haven't encountered them there. We've been really close. So anyway, this elk is actually quite responsive.
Yeah.
And it's sounding aggressive, and so you're doing your calling, and I'm standing there, and it's not quite shooting time, but I see across from me on the hillside, and it's very dark on that hillside because of the burnt trees, because of the fire. So I don't actually see the whole elk. All I see is the white of the fur, and he's about 130 yards across from me, coming down.
It's a light tan,
Yeah,
but it feels white.
And it
in the
looks
early morning
well,
light.
and it's ghostly.
Yeah.
I don't see legs. I don't see antlers. I don't see eyes. I
Yeah.
just see a blob of white coming down the hillside. But I know what that is.
Of course.
And I was like, hell yes. This is working.
This is happening.
So everything that we know was reinforced in that one. Just as soon as that elk comes down, I see him. And I'm like, all the work is paying off. Regardless of what happens beyond this point. To this point, all the work we've put in, all the knowledge we've gained, and all the experience we've had, it all makes sense. And it just made me appreciate the dedication that we've had and the time and effort we put in.
Yeah.
I still don't know what's going to happen, but I see this thing coming down. It didn't stop and make any noises. It looks like it's headed somewhere. And my brain starts to overanalyze. So I still clearly need more experience with what I'm witnessing.
We all do.
But I see this thing coming down, and it goes across by what we used to call the giving tree.
Yeah.
And it's 110 yards
It
away.
burned in the fire, but
But-
it was a good place.
The elk goes down out of sight, and I'm thinking, well, maybe this thing is just going down. My brain was dumb. It's going down the hillside to come up across from us on the other mountain,
Yeah,
like
yeah.
the place we call the Butt Crack. And I was like, okay, well, I don't want it to go too far. So once it gets out of view, I mew.
Oh.
Okay.
Okay.
So
Okay.
I just want to make it known that there's a bull that you're pretending to be a bull and you're pretending to be a cow.
A couple different cows,
and
yeah.
I'm going to pretend to be another cow.
Yeah.
Which maybe not the smartest choice, but
In hindsight, no.
in hindsight, not the best option. But there's still something really interesting about this whole encounter, about my noise and your noise, and things that we did right versus things we didn't screw up.
Right.
So after a while, I'm looking around. I'm like, I don't see this thing coming back. And then I look over to my left, and I have a couple of dead trees between me and my left. And so the elk disappeared below the giving tree, but it followed just below the ridge line, and then it came back up 60 yards from me.
And behind you, between me and you.
Yeah, to my left,
Yeah.
I would have to seriously turn around. So this thing wanted to know what we were.
Yeah.
It was trying to figure you out.
Yeah.
But because I had made noise, he also had his radar on me.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And so I look over at him. I actually was able to clock him with my rangefinder
Yeah?
at 60 yards.
Wow. Wow.
And but I did not have a shot, and it was not shooting time.
Minutes away.
So we were just a little bit off on our timing, but this elk just kind of stood there, and you kept making noise. Like it doesn't make any sense to me that it was so curious about what we were. And even though it should have been able to tell what we were, however we were dressed, the camo, and I wouldn't call what I was wearing camo, but it wasn't revealing either.
Right.
But the fact that you kept making noise and not knowing it was there, it just stood there. And then I made a noise because I was being idiotic with that call. And it just was like, huh.
Yeah.
And then it slowly turned around. And when it slowly turned around, I go, it's not spooked, but it's not convinced.
Right.
And it goes back the way it came. And I lost track, and I was trying to see if you were coming around or what you're doing. And then I was looking, and I couldn't figure out where it went because it disappeared out of sight. And all of a sudden, it barked
Yeah.
so loud that I thought an elk came from behind me, but it was actually right next to that. It was sort of in a gap between the giving tree and the burnt forest again.
Yeah.
It was standing right there, and it actually was legal shooting time. I could tell. There's certain enough. What would you say? Enough experience with daylight and
Yeah.
shooting time.
You build a data set.
You kind of know that the way the light reflects off the environment, you go, okay, this is definitely shooting time, because I can actually make out the different colors of brown and tan, and I can see his antlers. I mean, so before, though, when he was at 60 yards away, I didn't have a shot because of the trees. I didn't have a shot because it was still too dark. It was like just minutes. It's like this weird transition. And so he comes back. He barks so loud. I looked around like, where's the elk? Where's the elk?
Because you didn't know it was coming from him.
And then I look back across and I see him. I'm like, oh my gosh. He wants us to be more revealing. We're not giving him enough data.
Yeah.
He didn't smell us. There was no wind.
Yeah.
He's barking because he knows that he believes there's competition.
Yeah.
And what we'll find out later is he had a small harem.
Yeah. He had a good
And
group of cows.
He's coming down to increase his harem, and he felt like he was the bigger bull. And so he barks, and he continues barking at us, but he starts to just wander off, but he's not spooked at any point in time. He's not spooked.
Right.
It's more like, you know what? I spent enough time trying to figure this out. I'm not convinced that you're an elk, but I'm not convinced you're not an elk, but I have a harem that I'm going to go back to, because to me right now that's more important, but I gave it my, so I don't mean to anthropomorphize.
The fear of losing what you have is greater than the desire to have more.
Right.
So I'm pretending to be a cow, which is more. He doesn't want to lose the cows he has. So it's a really delicate game.
Yeah.
And I'm not that familiar with him.
We still don't know quite what his size is, but he's big.
He's a full size.
He's a full-size bull.
Yeah.
And so, but this experience really brings home a lot of lessons that still have some ground to gain, but at the same time, we've gained an amazing amount of ground in the time we put in.
Yeah.
And really, it's been in the last decade that we've been doing that, even though we thought we were doing it in the previous decade.
Right.
We were nowhere close.
Right.
Because we were trying to do all the things that we knew or didn't know were really not helpful. but I will even argue though that we were making ground. It was a slow progression, and then it hit a point where the progression sped up exponentially, and we started to just have the success. So it's not that it's not all for naught, or it's not all lost in terms of that the aughts, if you will. So I never got to have an arrow pulled back on this guy.
Right.
But to me, it's one of the successes I've had that I appreciate the most, because I just didn't expect much. I had low expectations. The previous year up there, we saw a handful of bulls on the last day. We got within 70, but it didn't.
We have spent, I don't know, 40, 50 hours in a hunting season and not had that much action.
Yeah.
So expectations are low because we know it's this we got today.
Yep.
We have today, and that's about it. If we're super desperate,
we kept trying to follow this guy. We thought there was maybe more, but there wasn't. It just the way that his bugles were echoing, it kind of made it sound like there was maybe.
I had a full on conversation with him, and I was really surprised. And I've been going over these notes. I wish I probably should have, pulled out my phone and talked to it and made the notes there on the side of the mountain. But what I recall from me being back behind you in that calling situation, when I bugled, he screamed, he lip-balled, screamed like, I am not putting up with you. I could kick your rear end.
Yeah.
I am ready to fight. That's what he said. But I could cow talk, and he would bugle to that.
Yeah.
Softly.
Yep.
He would still bugle.
It's like he was, come on, baby, let's go.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like, what's up, girl? How you doing? And then it was like, don't get near me.
Can I have your number?
Right?
Can I get your number?
You're not that guy, pal. You're not that guy.
Can I get your number?
Yeah. And so that was interesting. And when I noticed that difference, I did it a few more times.
Yep.
So I could be like, yeah, that's definitely happening. Yep, that's definitely the sound that he makes. And I kept having that conversation, but he kept getting further and further away. And it's still, you're in a part of the hill, you're kind of in some trees, so I can't even see you. I didn't even see you. You're far enough away. I can't see you without binoculars.
Right.
And I'm old, man. And I pull up with the binoculars and I see, oh, he's waving at me to come in.
Yeah. Because by that time I had seen him go up the hill.
Yeah.
And he's no longer interested in playing around. And that correlates also with the time that other hunters might be out there making too much noise. So we got there at the prime time right before. So it's your experience, and I think this will probably be that way up there for a while. You got to be up there right at shooting time. You got to be at elevation. You got to be up where they are at, and they're always high up there.
Yeah.
They have been lower before
because there's water. There's water up high.
There's a lot of water up this place.
Even that little spring, this magical little spring that we sit and get the best tasting water.
Oh my gosh.
I thought because of the gully washer that came through there that spring would be no more.
Yeah, oh, it's still there.
But which is crazy because the gully
like
wash
10 feet away and it's 4 feet deep.
Yeah. And here's this spring still burbling up beautiful spring water.
It's mind-boggling that the spring isn't like popping out in the gully. It's
I know.
Two different.
I know. It's wild. That's why it must be coming off this whole one side of the mountain.
We went and got your camera and
Yep.
learned a disastrous fate of the.
Yeah, I didn't. Something was wrong. Something was wrong with the SD card. It didn't get any photographs.
Yeah,
I was totally bummed.
Yeah,
that's even worse than seeing a branch. Right? There was a branch that died and bent and just like went right in front of the camera.
I was the first one to get the camera, and I was like, I was elated that I saw it because you never know.
It's been up there a while, yeah.
And then I got around the corner of the tree, and I was like, oh. Crap, my heart sank, man.
The higher you go on that mountain, the fewer guys that have been there.
Yeah, that we have learned.
Yeah, and we used to be some of those guys. Like, well, we don't need to climb that high in the mountain.
Yeah.
Then, oh yeah, we do.
Yeah, and that's where the success comes from, putting that time in to go up and being in shape to do it.
Yeah.
So we Peter patter around. We actually did take a nap, and I actually bought. So I mentioned this earlier in the podcast earlier this year that I bought this umbrella.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the umbrella it's basically made for people who are in tree stands.
Yeah.
And so you can sort of it'll screw into a tree and then you can position it to keep the sun off you. I've actually used it both times I went out. It's lightweight and it's effective for keeping the sun off your face when you're sitting over a wallow, if you don't have a tree stand or if you have a tree stand. But if you need to take a nap and you're just too lazy to move to some shade, which I was.
The shade keeps moving.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't sit for very long in one place because just
And for $20, I don't hate the investment.
Yeah.
I'm probably going to keep using it.
You had a great decoy too that we probably could have used in an opening setup. We probably should have used in an opening setup.
Yeah. Well, and I think more time and experience with the decoy and and shortening the distance, because we shouldn't be 100 yards apart.
No, we shouldn't. Yeah,
And-
there's a list of mistakes, a long list.
You know, because he came around as wide as he did because you were too far behind me.
Yeah,
You know, had you been closer, he'd probably come right through the middle of that field.
Yeah. I know. I lose sleep over it too.
And that ends today's podcast.
And he was big. He was a
pretty big
fella.
So
yeah.
we come back and we actually were able to trace him. We followed him a little bit in the morning, and then we went and got your camera, and then we came back.
Well, we followed him a little bit in the morning. We
watched
actually
them-
sat there and with the phone scope.
Yeah, and we watched them.
That's on YouTube.
We watched them bed down,
Yeah.
and I have to.
Well,
swallow my-
watched him. We watched him till he worked his way through Ripper Pass.
Yeah,
He just went over Ripper Pass. I'm sure that's where they were bedded. I've always thought for a few years now, I'm like, there's a place there. There's
Yeah.
a place there. We got to go there.
We've been on a few adventures based on that presumption.
Yeah.
And, you know, I would say the evidence definitely suggests more yes than no now that we saw something that happened that day. So they go away, they bed down, we take our little nap, and then we're like, well, let's go to Ripper Pass. And you're like, they're going to come out where they went in. And I was like, for whatever reason, I couldn't compute that.
Yeah.
I didn't, and I apologize. I should have appreciated
I
it
know
more.
you're kicking yourself. Don't.
'Cause-
I haven't kicked you once for it.
But because I was
Because
like,
I didn't know.
I got to a point where I'm like, I just felt too idle. And since I didn't have much time, I was feeling kind of stressed. So my brain was just like, I just needed to move around and just watch. Right. So, and then we started to move around because I'm like, let's hike back to the plateau and let's just see what else is moving. Because I just felt like time wasn't on my side. And so I just kind of let that get the best
Yeah,
of me.
and it is a tough decision. Do I go somewhere where I have advantage and I can glass and have options open, or do I try to get in close to where I think they might be? Maybe.
So I honestly didn't think you were correct.
I thought I might be correct. I mean,
And
that
I
Ripper
was like,
Pass is just a
My
cool place.
thought, and the reason why I didn't think you were correct is my brain is thinking they're elk. They move around. They might have been bed down, but they're headed somewhere else.
Yeah.
So lo and behold, not long after we decide to move, or I decide to move, and you're like, "Oh, I guess I'll go with you."
Well, I didn't say that. I'm hunting with you. I'm hunting with you, and I am at that moment. At that moment, I only felt like the elk would be there. I didn't know, and I didn't. And we've seen them all over the place up
Well,
there.
we weren't very far away from that. Well, it was a hike back from where we came, but we were getting close to. We were on the opposite side of the Ripper.
Yeah.
and we were kind of getting to that little trail.
And the
that-
clock is ticking. I mean, it's getting late. We've had
but-
our nap, and
But there they were coming out, but they weren't coming out at the place they went in.
we
They were-
heard them bugle first.
Yeah.
A couple of times before we even
Yeah.
spotted them.
And so the sun's going down, but they came out, in a place that would have been, it wouldn't have been the right choice to go up after them.
You don't have the wind. If you don't have the wind on your side, it's going to be
So,
worse than an uphill battle.
but even that, you know, we get back and, you know, ultimately nothing happened the rest of the day, but it was good to see him again.
Yes.
And it was good for me to get called out in a way. It was you called me out.
You learned.
My thought process needed to be called out by not jumping to that conclusion, being more open to the idea that, well, maybe, and I tried to be, but that data point was important. So it was a really important trip on many aspects.
It
even
was.
that.
It was.
And to be able to see the guy up close, to follow him for a while, come back later and still see that he's up there.
Yeah.
You know, to see the same group of elk more than once in a day. That was a rewarding experience.
Very, very.
And I still haven't found my arrows up there, but
Well, we'll have more trips.
we'll have more
see.
arrows to find.
Yeah, I hope so.
But so we hiked down, and I kind of mentioned it at camp. You know, I chose it didn't make sense to try to harvest an animal with such little time left. So we just decided to sleep in that next day and
Yeah.
kind of just mosey on home, which was the right decision. I got home and I had a lot of stupid work.
We
to
didn't
do,
just mosey home. I phone scoped Ripper Pass, and there was an elk there. You could see
Oh, that's
him
right.
from camp.
Yeah.
That was wild because when the sun hits that hillside,
That's right. Sorry, it took me a second.
Nothing shimmers like an elk.
Yeah.
And
When
you're
the-
like, wow.
Yeah, that morning sun comes up and hits those top peaks, and if
Yeah.
there's something up there that isn't a tree, it stands out like a sore thumb.
And what is he? 3 hours away?
Yeah,
If we hiked, maybe
Yeah.
3, 2.5 if we're
He-
hoofing it.
yeah,
Yeah. And then another group of elk opens up. There's a place
Oh, that's right.
where the aspens
Yeah.
are just perfectly in a gully, and they got big evergreens around them, and they
and nice
turn
rolling
color.
sage hills around
Yeah.
it.
And you just every time you look past that field towards those big mountains, you just go, I just know there's elk there.
Yep.
I just know. And the morning we left, there was elk there. And more than one bull.
Yeah,
Yeah. So Sunday morning was not a waste at all.
no,
that was really cool.
I think it was. I had to make the call I made, but it's like if we were able to get up and do exactly what we did the previous morning, which
Yeah.
was our plan,
Yeah.
we would have had a potentially similar opportunity. So even though we don't have the data point to say for sure, there were still elk up in that area where we were at, and had we been up there as we had planned,
Yeah.
I would have had an opportunity.
At first light again. Yeah.
So
We would have had a calling opportunity, I believe. At least. If not a
least.
shooting
At
opportunity.
least, yeah.
Yeah.
So this year is such a positive. I know the opening weekend was horrible because I had a stupid cough.
Opening weekend
And it
was
was stupid
epic
hot.
because of it. I mean, everything that happens.
I don't have any food. I had food, but Jared didn't.
Oh my gosh.
But it's a.
I talked to him again this week.
Is he doing okay?
Yeah, he's
Did
doing
he go?
fine.
Did he go hunting with his
He's-
stint?
Listen, man. Yeah, he is. He's going out this weekend. He goes, we're going to climb Antone Peak. Dude, you had a heart attack 3 weeks ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's all right. I mean, I quit smoking. I quit drinking 2 weeks ago. But the doctors cleared him for any physical activity.
Okay.
I go, can we get drunk and go to the strip bar? That's a physical activity, I
Right.
guess.
Right.
But I was just kidding. Or
So-
was I? No. So knowing all that, and it was nice to talk to Jared, and I did talk to him about maybe we do something different, maybe we do something. He goes, man, it was perfect. It was perfect. He really wants to backpack in again.
Okay.
Hard to say no.
Yeah.
Because once we got in,
It was.
we just camp. We're just camping. It's kind
It
of
was a
roughing it.
breeze.
Yeah. Yeah, but it wasn't a whole lot of work. But I did when I talked to him this week, he says he never got further than 100 yards out of camp after we arrived that
Yeah.
whole weekend.
Yeah.
So it took a lot out of him.
Yeah.
That hike took a lot out of him, and he says he just would get tired. He says he thinks he may have had a stroke
Huh.
because he'd stretch out on the ground and kind of wiggle and do some weird stuff. I don't know. You can talk to him about it. Good luck, by the way.
Yeah.
And I don't know, but knowing, so this is kind of the debrief. And when we go through deer season, I like to debrief and say, what happened? What can we do different? So what's the plan for next year? How do we correct?
I'm only going out
correct.
for a Friday evening, Saturday, Sunday, Monday hunt on Labor Day
Okay,
weekend.
traditional Labor Day weekend.
Yeah, I just
It's never going to be the rut. I mean, they
it's
sometimes they
fun.
bugle, sometimes they do. but
We got. I mean, I was spoiled that weekend when we went out.
a couple weekends, a
yeah.
couple different years.
2 different years. I was
we
spoiled
went
out there.
that weekend. Yeah,
And they were talking, and it was cold.
They
that
were rutting
second
hard.
year.
Yeah, they were rutting hard.
So, but I'm gonna hold off till the end and try to pack some days there, and it's gonna suck because, actually, no, it won't suck. Sorry, I was just thinking I have to take some special days for my anniversary in April, but I'm on a contract year, and the contract renews itself in July, which means my days that I can take off
Yeah.
renew.
Oh, okay. Good deal. Good deal.
Anyway, so and I can take days that are
so
no questions.
and then we'll concentrate them in the sort of the last week
The
of
last-
September, the last half anyway, at least,
Yeah.
to see what weekend is going to work. We're going to see how the spring goes, and I really think a couple things I really thought about after this hunt. Sorry, are you done? I mean, are you?
I wasn't talking.
Well,
You
I just
were
thought,
trying to
man,
recap, and there were some things you wanted to say.
I don't mind having a tent in it. It's a good life in a cabin tent. We're real close to the trailhead. We can hike straight from camp, but we also leave the tent on an empty belly. I mean, I had a cup of hot cocoa and we're out the door and we're moving, which is great. But I do get hungry.
Yeah,
and it does take a lot of nutrition to hike in elk country. So I thought if we could wake up at 4, but further down, but at a camper, right, where we got a heater on and we can have a little breakfast, let it digest as we take that 15, 20 minutes up to the trailhead, leave from the trailhead at 5 a.m. So if we can, as long as we can make it to that trailhead at 5 a.m., and where, if we need to be 2 hours in, then 5 a.m. it is. If we need to be 3 hours in, it had to be 4. But I've come across that. I don't even know how many times. I've heard a hunter say, I was successful because I was up and hiking in the dark.
Yeah.
Long before everybody else.
And that's what I've heard too. I haven't heard it that same way. I've heard it in this way. Get used to being in the dark.
Yeah.
And get over your fears of hiking in the dark. It was more of a, and that's true. You gotta, and I think I've gotten more comfortable with that as I've gotten older. I used to be a little bit more afraid of it, but I'm not really anymore.
Yeah. Hiking in the dark kind of has that, for me, it's like a roller coaster. It's scary, but I know I'm going to be safe.
Yeah.
Right? It has that kind of feel. Like there's nothing to be scared of, but I'm scared anyway.
Yeah.
There's those rare things that may happen on a roller coaster or in the woods, but they're such outliers. It's nothing to be really concerned about. But the note I made was when I read these stories, these guys, I'm up 3 hours before every other hunter.
Yeah.
That's what they're saying.
Yeah.
They're not saying it's about going and hiking in the dark. It's about being there way before other people.
Yeah.
Because especially this guy one of them was talking about rifle season, and he just knows the way hunters move, they're going to push elk through this saddle. And if I'm up on top of that saddle, hey, they're my elk. Yeah.
So it would apply to almost any season.
Yeah.
So the earlier the better. And if you got up in the dark and you still had an hour before shooting time and you're there, you're doing it right as much. But we've tried that method and we've been frozen. We get a little bit too cold. Well, we weren't ever that early. I guess it was just that we would get up there early, but sometimes the weather would just be crap, and so you'd freeze. And there's
a lot of things. There's a lot of things to put into the algorithm of when we leave and how hard we hunt. I mean, if you, like I said, we have a hard day. If we have a hard day, it's okay to take tomorrow off. Your body needs rest.
Yeah.
And if you push yourself, you're going to be miserable. You're not going to have a happy elk season. Elk season is about the happiness that it brings you. And if you're either you're out of shape, you're too out of shape to hike 2 days in a row, or you've hiked so hard, nobody's in that good of shape.
Yeah.
When I packed my elk out, I had a really hard day and then I had an even harder day. But knowing what was at the end of that hard day, I'm like, okay, I had my donuts waiting for me in the car. Right?
Yeah.
But it's hard to know how hard to push yourself. And if you push yourself too hard, and we've done that, we get a little grumpy, we get a little hangry, and we start taking it out on each other because we're brothers.
There's one specific time that really pops in there.
Oh man, I wanted to hug you so bad.
I couldn't do it anymore.
And I knew you wouldn't take a hug from me, but I wanted to hug you so bad. It was so miserable. We had a long day.
I knew what I needed to, and I just had to shut down and get rest.
Yeah.
But oh my gosh. Sorry, what was it? It was
you spilled dinner.
It was a Mississippi roast that we just had to get warmed up. And so we're talking about.
It wasn't just dinner. It was home cooked,
home-cooked,
reheated, leftover awesomeness.
And it wasn't leftover. I cooked it specifically for this. So I had split it up into 2 nights, and I was getting it warm, and then all of a sudden I turned around and I'm just so tired I'm not able to pay attention, and it dumps over in the tent. And I just
I don't even have you barely have the energy to eat it.
Yeah.
let alone clean it up and be happy.
And so I was just like,
Oh, that was
I
bad.
said, you got to make your own dinner, man. I'm sorry. It's gone. And I threw it out and I was very,
Oh.
I crawled in the bed and I just fell asleep. And you're like, are you okay?
I'm
and
so
I'm like,
sorry. Yeah.
I'm fine.
No, I know all those emotions. I would have felt the same way. Don't talk to me.
So-
don't try to hug me. Don't try to console me in any way, or I will kill you.
And truth be told, yes, that would have happened. But
Yeah.
truth be told, so we hiked into what we call the backyard that day.
Yeah,
And then we hiked the wrong way out.
yeah,
I think I've learned to appreciate, use the highways. Don't overthink it.
the elk are
Right.
smart. They make trails where they make trails for a good reason.
And so that was one of those times. But after that trip,
Yeah,
if you ever caught me being hesitant about the backyard, that's the trip that
really,
did it to me.
really. Okay,
But this year, I was willing to go back there, but we also didn't have time. And you were like, I'm not feeling it because you're sore from your hunt. Because I was like, let's go to the backyard, man.
I was in for as much as you're in for,
But then,
reluctantly.
but we got to a certain point, and
Yeah.
it made sense for me as well as you. It just let's not push it too far. We don't have a lot of time. The backyard, although I felt like I could do it, I recognized you're still healing, and the
Yeah.
backyard is more of a trip if you get something. So we just
Yep.
kind of kept it local, but
And I really felt strongly about the group of elk we had an encounter with.
yeah, that they were going to come back
I did
out.
feel
Yeah.
pretty strong that they're there. They're just
Yeah.
on the other side of Ripper Pass. And we didn't. Well, anyway,
They did come out,
they did.
not
They
at the
did.
place that we were hoping,
Not exactly at the place. They might have been 150, 200 yards away.
but they were there.
Yeah.
So that kind of wraps up the elk season this year. We have some notes for next year, changes on tactics, making sure we're a little more cognizant of distance apart from each other, calling strategies. Don't do anything if I have the opportunity. I should not be
a
making
shooter
noises.
and a caller.
Yeah.
There's a
it's
shooter and a
just-
caller.
But I didn't. The lucky thing about this is I didn't ruin anything. But I can't look at that and say, well, that was fine then, and continue that behavior, because that's not going to be the
Yeah.
case moving forward. I got lucky for whatever reason, and I'm not wearing camo like you're wearing camo. I'm wearing a brown shirt
Yeah.
and green pants,
Yeah.
like I work for the Forest Service.
Right.
Right. That's kind of what I think people might think I am. And so, anyway, and then, having, a better home base would be nice, if we're able to get into something,
So my thought was, I spent more days in September sleeping outside than I did sleeping inside. That's a lot. Right?
yeah.
I mean, 10, 15 days. I think by the time we were done, I had spent 13 days outside, and it wasn't even, it was the 27th, 28th
Yeah.
or whatever. Or it wasn't even then. So I spent a lot of time outside. Okay, if I could take those 10 days and put them all together, well, what would I need? Those 10 or 15 days? Well, I would need better camp, because I come
Yeah.
home and I regroup. I take showers. I clean all my clothes because they're just terrible. So I would need a better base if I'm going to stay up there for an extended period, a week or more.
Yeah.
I'm going to need a little bit of a camper. So that's when I thought, oh, you know what? If as long as we're at the trailhead by 5 a.m.,
Yeah.
we're going to be okay, as long as we get to the trailhead at the right time. So that was definitely part of that, is to concentrate those days instead on the weekends, to be able to concentrate them into more of the concentrated rut time.
Yeah.
In the later part of September. So that's a dream. That's a dream I'll keep dreaming until next year.
Yeah.
Maybe
And
we'll get there.
And in the meantime, we'll keep track of anything that comes down the pipeline of conservation. Chronic wasting disease was found again.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of stuff. Probably not for tonight, because we're just a couple minutes shy.
Yeah,
but,
we're good. We're good.
But I think it was good to have the conversation. We're not done with this season necessarily, because I think there's still stories to wrap up 2022
Sure.
with. And so we'll see what happens in the coming weeks. But
Yeah.
it's been a fun journey so far. So if I forget to say it by the end of the year, which I'll probably remember, but thank you again for kind of encouraging the content, encouraging the podcast. And regardless of how few people are out there listening,
Yeah.
it's been useful for focus, useful for thought and development of tactics and skills. And it's been a good trip so far. So
it has been beneficial to me. I mean, the reason for elk season is to keep your head in the game.
Yeah.
Man, fitness, it starts, elk season starts today.
Yeah.
Every day. You need to be fit. You need to be strong. And getting into shape for elk hunting activity, the older you get especially, the more you need to stay in shape. And so having the podcast and talking about it regularly and thinking about it regularly means I'm thinking about exercise. I'm thinking about how I feel in the mountains. And I'm also thinking about elk. So when I go to YouTube, right, I'll watch some fresh elk content. And to just keep my brain in elk season, partially at least, year round. Year round. That's what I wanted elk season to be. Just if you haven't listened, listen. And if you have listened, listen again. Keep listening, because we're going through the year as often as we can. Sometimes most of the time it's every week. Sometimes we miss a couple.
Yeah.
We missed all of elk season for the podcast.
Yeah.
Which is just fine.
Which makes sense, I'll be honest.
Yeah.
I wouldn't feel right doing a podcast during elk season, because that tells the world and myself one thing.
I'm not hunting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a horrible reminder. Well, it's elk season. Let's do a podcast about it.
Eh.
Anyway,
I don't mind doing it during October though.
Yeah, October's great.
Season.
Yeah, when it's there's I feel the gulf growing between rifle and elk the more I do this.
Yeah.
Right. I do feel my head's more in the game, but I also do feel the gulf. And I know I make fun of it, but there's a big difference between rifle and elk.
I had a student that went elk hunting during rifle season.
Yeah,
with their family, and they said, "Hey, how's this going to impact grade?" And as we talk about, we get it set up, and I'm sympathetic to a point, but also at the same time, I recognize this is not an activity we really have an excused absences for, but. I shared with them that I'm a bow hunter and even though they're a rifle hunter, and the student was like, man, I always wanted to do that. So what's interesting is I think there are a lot of hunters out there that are like, I don't think they know or understand, or they're not sure how to get into it still. So I think that's what's interesting about it is there's been an increase of interest in activity with bow hunting, but there's still a group out there that I have an interest in doing that. But there's this I don't want to say that it's enabling, but there is something about rifle season that kind of keeps them locked, and they kind of see the other side. And it's not that it's greener by any stretch of the imagination, because I saw 3 pictures when they got back of each one of the party's bulls.
Oh, wow.
3 big 6x6s.
In one party?
In one party.
How many people in that one party?
4.
That's pretty good.
So
that's better than the 10% you get with a bow.
And one of them wasn't a hunter. So dad, brother, student.
Oh, wow.
All harvested. Now, so there's something to be said about, hey, I don't have to be so darn close, but that's not, we made it clear that it's not that we're against rifles, but it is
not at all.
It's not the same game.
It just isn't. Yeah.
And we just like the challenge of bow hunting more, because it doesn't guarantee success.
Right.
In terms of harvest, but there is a guaranteed, I get to be much more intimate with nature.
Yes.
And it requires me to be.
Yes.
So that to me is what pulls me back out.
And the weather's way better.
Yeah.
The weather's way better in September than October or November. Yeah. That is objective.
I did buy a rifle and I drew for a hunt during October, and it rained and it rained.
Yeah.
And it rained. So.
Yeah. That was one of the most frustrating things about rifle hunting is, man, I would like to get out and hike.
Right.
But the weather sucks. So part of what drew me in to bow season is just the weather. Then you realize you're shooting a bow, and then everybody else sucks. So then, right?
Yeah.
So, and that's really my attitude. But anyway,
that's all the time we really have. We just went over by about a minute. So thank you so much, and we'll see you on the next podcast.
Hang in there. Yeah, should be next week.
All right.
All right.
Be well.
Goodbye.
Cheers. I don't need to do that, but I do.